The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Morrison and Associates law firm on the 32nd floor of the Columbia Center in downtown Seattle. Thomas Carter sat in the plush leather chair across from his longtime attorney, watching the November storm rage over Elliott Bay while waiting for what should have been a routine meeting about updating his will. At 42, Thomas had built Carter Industries from a small tech startup into a $15 million enterprise specializing in cybersecurity software. The recent chest pains that had sent him to the emergency room 2 weeks ago had been nothing more than stress and too much caffeine, but the scare had reminded him that life was unpredictable and his estate planning needed attention. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Thomas," said Jonathan Morrison as he entered his office, carrying a thick manila folder and wearing an expression that immediately set off alarm bells. At 58, Morrison had been the Carter family attorney for over 15 years, handling everything from business contracts to Thomas's marriage to Elena 5 years ago. "No problem, John. I know you're busy," Thomas replied, noting the unusual tension in his old friend's demeanor. "I just want to make sure everything's in order after that hospital visit. Elena's been worried about what would happen if something serious occurred." Morrison settled behind his mahogany desk, but instead of his usual professional confidence, he seemed nervous, almost reluctant to begin. He opened the folder and stared at the documents inside for a long moment before looking up at Thomas. "Thomas, before we begin, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you reviewed your will and estate planning documents?" "About 2 years ago, when we bought the house in Bellevue." "Why?" Morrison's expression grew more troubled. "And you haven't made any changes since then? No updates, no modifications to beneficiaries or asset distribution?" Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Seattle weather. "John, what's going on? You're acting like there's a problem." Morrison hesitated, his fingers drumming nervously on the desk. "Thomas, I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how to approach this delicately. Just tell me straight. We've known each other too long for diplomatic language." Morrison took a deep breath and opened the folder completely. "Your wife made some updates last week." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Thomas felt his stomach drop as the implications began to sink in. "What kind of updates?" "Significant ones," Morrison replied carefully. "Elena came in last Tuesday with what she claimed was your authorization to make changes to your will and estate planning. She had documentation that appeared to give her power of attorney for these matters." Thomas's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "I never gave Elena power of attorney for anything. What kind of changes are we talking about?" Morrison's reluctance was palpable as he removed a document from the folder. "The primary beneficiary of your estate has been changed from a 50-50 split between Elena and your charitable foundation to 75% for Elena and 25% for her brother Marcus." The room seemed to tilt around Thomas. "Marcus? Elena's brother gets a quarter of my estate? John, I barely know the man. He's been to our house maybe 3 times in 5 years." "There's more," Morrison continued grimly. "The business succession plan has been altered. Instead of the management structure we established, Elena would have complete control of Carter Industries, with Marcus as co-executor of the estate." Thomas stood up abruptly, pacing to the window where the storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos in his mind. "This is impossible. Elena knows nothing about running a tech company, and Marcus, he's a failed real estate agent who's been borrowing money from us for years." "Thomas, I have to ask, are you certain you didn't authorize these changes? Perhaps during your medical scare, when you were stressed or medicated?" "Absolutely not," Thomas said firmly. "I was conscious and alert throughout the entire hospital experience. I never signed anything, never spoke to Elena about changing the will, and I certainly never gave her power of attorney." Morrison's expression grew even more grave. "Then we have a serious problem. The documents Elena provided appear legitimate, notarized, witnessed, with what looks like your signature." Thomas turned from the window, his mind racing. "You're telling me my wife forged my signature to steal my inheritance?" I'm telling you that someone submitted fraudulent documents to alter your estate planning, and Elena was the person who submitted them. As the reality of the situation sank in, Thomas felt a cold rage building in his chest. Elena, the woman he had loved and trusted for 5 years, had been planning to steal his life's work. But why? And why now? John, I need to see everything. Every document, every signature, every piece of paper Elena submitted. Morrison spread the documents across his desk, and Thomas studied them with the analytical mind that had built his business empire. The signatures looked convincingly like his own, but there were subtle differences that he could detect. The way the T in Thomas was formed, the angle of the C in Carter. These are good forgeries, Thomas admitted, but they're still forgeries. What's the legal process for challenging this? That's complicated, Morrison replied. Elena submitted medical documentation suggesting that you've been experiencing cognitive issues related to stress and your recent health scare. She claimed you've been forgetful, making poor business decisions, and that she was concerned about your mental state. Thomas felt his blood pressure rising. Cognitive issues. John, you've known me for 15 years. Do I seem cognitively impaired to you? Of course not. But Elena's documentation creates a narrative that could be difficult to challenge in court. She's essentially claiming that you're not competent to manage your own affairs. The pieces of a larger conspiracy were beginning to fall into place in Thomas's mind. Elena's recent behavior, which he had attributed to concern about his health, now took on a more sinister meaning. Her insistence on accompanying him to medical appointments, her questions about his business operations, her sudden interest in their financial planning. How long would it take to reverse these changes? Thomas asked. Months, possibly years, if Elena contests our challenge. And Thomas, there's something else you need to know. Morrison's tone suggested that the worst revelations were yet to come. Elena also submitted a request to have herself appointed as your healthcare proxy and financial guardian in the event of your incapacitation. She's essentially positioned herself to control every aspect of your life if you become unable to make decisions for yourself. Thomas sat back down heavily, the full scope of Elena's betrayal becoming clear. She hadn't just stolen his money. She had created a legal framework to control his entire existence. John, this isn't just theft. This is a complete takeover of my life. It appears that way, yes. Thomas's phone buzzed with a text message from Elena. How's your meeting with John going, honey? Don't forget we have dinner with Marcus tonight. He's excited to discuss some business opportunities with you. The casual tone of the message, sent while Thomas was discovering her betrayal, made his hands shake with rage. Elena was so confident in her scheme that she was planning to celebrate with her co-conspirator, while Thomas was still uncovering her crimes. Thomas, Morrison said carefully, there's one more thing. Elena mentioned that you've been having more health issues lately. She seemed particularly concerned about your heart condition. What heart condition? I had chest pains from stress. The doctors said my heart is fine. Morrison's expression grew troubled. She specifically mentioned that you've been having episodes of chest pain and shortness of breath. She seemed very knowledgeable about cardiac symptoms. A chill ran down Thomas's spine as a horrifying possibility occurred to him. John, what exactly did Elena say about my health? She said that given your recent cardiac episodes and the stress of running the business, she was worried about your long-term prognosis. She mentioned that your doctor had expressed concerns about your lifestyle and the possibility of more serious cardiac events. Thomas felt the room spinning around him. I never told Elena any of that. My doctor never said anything about long-term prognosis or serious cardiac events. The implications were staggering. Elena wasn't just planning to steal his money. She was creating a medical narrative that would explain his sudden death or incapacitation. The forged documents, the healthcare proxy, the claims of cognitive impairment. It was all part of a plan to either control him completely or eliminate him entirely. John, I think my wife is planning to kill me. Morrison's face went white. Thomas, that's a very serious accusation. Think about it. She's positioned herself to inherit everything. She's created a medical narrative to explain my death, and she's brought her brother into the conspiracy to help manage the aftermath. All she needs now is for me to have a convenient heart attack. As Thomas spoke, his phone buzzed again with another message from Elena. Marcus brought some interesting supplements that might help with your stress and heart issues. Can't wait for you to try them tonight. Thomas showed the message to Morrison, whose expression grew increasingly alarmed. Thomas, if you're right about this, you're in immediate danger. We need to contact the police. No, Thomas said, his mind working furiously. If we go to the police now, Elena will just claim I'm having a paranoid episode related to my supposed cognitive decline. She's created the perfect setup to discredit anything I say. Then what do you propose? Thomas looked out at the Seattle skyline, his reflection in the window showing a man who had just discovered that his entire life was a lie. But it also showed a man who had built a successful business by outthinking his competitors and staying 3 steps ahead of potential threats. I propose we let Elena think her plan is working, Thomas said slowly. I'll play the role of the trusting husband while we gather evidence of her conspiracy. When we have enough proof to destroy her completely, then we'll make our move. Morrison looked skeptical. Thomas, if you're right about her intentions, that's incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than letting her succeed, Thomas countered. John, Elena has spent months planning this. She's not going to stop just because we've discovered her forged documents. She's going to escalate until she gets what she wants. As Thomas prepared to leave Morrison's office, his mind was already working on a plan that would expose Elena's conspiracy and protect him from whatever she had planned for that evening's dinner with Marcus. John, I need you to do something for me. Prepare new estate documents, the real ones that reflect my actual wishes, but don't file them yet. I want Elena to think she succeeded until we're ready to destroy her completely. And what are you going to do? Thomas smiled grimly as he looked out at the storm raging over Seattle. I'm going to go home and have dinner with my loving wife and her brother, and I'm going to be very careful about what I eat and drink. As Thomas left the law office, he realized that the chest pains that had started this entire chain of events might have saved his life. Without that hospital visit, he never would have discovered Elena's betrayal until it was too late. Now he had a chance to turn the tables on the woman who had planned to steal his life's work and possibly his life itself. The game was about to begin, and Thomas Carter intended to win. Thomas Carter sat in his Tesla Model S in the parking garage beneath Morrison and Associates, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he tried to process the magnitude of Elena's betrayal. The rain continued to pound against the concrete structure, creating an echo that matched the chaos in his mind. His wife of 5 years had not only stolen his inheritance, but had potentially been planning his murder. His phone buzzed with another message from Elena. Traffic is terrible. Marcus and I are already at the restaurant. We got us a nice private table in the back. Can't wait to see you, darling. The heart emoji at the end of the message made Thomas's stomach turn. Elena was texting him loving messages while sitting with her co-conspirator, probably discussing the final details of whatever they had planned for tonight. Thomas started the car and began the drive home to Bellevue, his mind racing through 5 years of marriage, looking for signs he had missed. Elena Rodriguez had seemed perfect when they met at a tech conference in San Francisco, beautiful, intelligent, and supportive of his business ambition. She had a background in marketing and had helped Carter Industries expand into new markets after their marriage. But now Thomas realized that Elena's interest in his business hadn't been supportive. It had been strategic. She had been learning every detail of his operations, his finances, and his vulnerabilities while playing the role of the devoted wife. As he drove through the Seattle traffic, Thomas called his longtime friend and business partner, Jake Morrison, Jonathan's younger brother, who served as Carter Industries' chief technology officer. Tom, how did the will meeting go? Jake's voice came through the car's speakers with his usual casual friendliness. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Elena been asking you questions about the business lately, about operations, finances, anything unusual?" There was a pause before Jake responded. "Actually, yeah. She's been pretty curious about our client contracts and revenue streams. I figured you had asked her to help with some business development stuff." Thomas felt his suspicions confirmed. "What kind of questions specifically?" "She wanted to know about our biggest clients, our recurring revenue, and our growth projections. She also asked about the company's valuation and what would happen to operations if something happened to you. If something happened to me. She said she was worried about your health after the hospital scare and wanted to understand how the business would continue if you couldn't work for a while." Thomas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Elena had been gathering intelligence about his business while expressing concern for his health, creating the perfect cover for her investigation. "Jake, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to keep this completely confidential. Can you run a security audit on all of Elena's access to company systems? I want to know every file she's accessed, every email she's sent, every piece of information she's reviewed." "Tom, what's going on? You're starting to worry me." "I'll explain everything later. Right now, I just need to know what Elena has been doing with her access to Carter Industries. I'll run the audit tonight and have results for you in the morning. But Tom, if Elena is up to something, you need to be careful." As Thomas ended the call, he realized that Jake's warning was more prescient than his friend knew. If Elena was planning something for tonight's dinner, Thomas needed to be very careful indeed. He stopped at a pharmacy and purchased a small digital recorder, then drove to a medical supply store where he bought a portable heart monitor, the kind used by patients with cardiac conditions. If Elena was planning to poison him or cause a heart attack, he wanted medical evidence of what she had done. The drive to their Bellevue home took him through some of Seattle's most expensive neighborhoods, past the kind of houses that Elena would be able to afford once she inherited his fortune. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was driving home to the woman who was planning to kill him for the money to buy a bigger house. Their home was a stunning contemporary design overlooking Lake Washington, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open floor plan that Elena had insisted on when they bought it 3 years ago. Now Thomas wondered if she had chosen the isolated location and open design for more sinister reasons. As he pulled into the driveway, Thomas noticed that Elena's car was gone. She was indeed already at the restaurant with Marcus. He used the opportunity to search their home for any evidence of her conspiracy. In Elena's home office, Thomas found a folder hidden behind her computer that contained documents he had never seen before. Insurance policies on his life that he didn't remember signing, medical records that seemed to exaggerate his recent health issues, and most damning of all, a handwritten note in Elena's writing. "T's episode's getting worse. M says the supplements will accelerate the timeline. Need to be ready for emergency medical response." Thomas photographed everything with his phone, his hands shaking as he realized that Elena and Marcus had been planning his death in detail. The supplements Marcus had brought weren't to help his health. They were designed to cause the heart attack that would make Elena a wealthy widow. His phone rang with a call from Elena. "Darling, where are you? Marcus and I are getting worried." "Sorry, honey. And traffic was terrible, and I stopped to pick up some wine for dinner. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't worry about wine. Marcus brought a special bottle to celebrate your recovery from the hospital scare. We're so grateful you're healthy and safe." The casual way Elena lied while planning his murder made Thomas feel sick, but it also strengthened his resolve to expose her completely before she could hurt anyone else. "I love you, Elena," Thomas said, meaning it for perhaps the last time. "I love you too, darling, more than you'll ever know." As Thomas drove to the restaurant, he activated the digital recorder and the heart monitor, creating a comprehensive record of whatever Elena and Marcus had planned for the evening. If they succeeded in poisoning him, at least there would be evidence of their crimes. The restaurant Elena had chosen was Canlis, one of Seattle's most exclusive establishments, with private dining rooms that would provide perfect cover for whatever they had planned. Thomas parked his car and sat for a moment, preparing mentally for what might be his last meal. But as he walked toward the restaurant entrance, Thomas felt a cold determination settle over him. Elena thought she was about to become a wealthy widow, but she had underestimated the man she had married. Thomas Carter hadn't built a successful business by being naive or trusting, and he wasn't about to let his wife murder him for money. The hostess led him to a private dining room where Elena and Marcus were waiting with champagne glasses and warm smiles. Elena looked stunning in a black dress that would be perfect for a funeral, and Marcus wore an expensive suit that he probably couldn't afford on his real estate agent's income. "Thomas!" Elena stood and kissed him warmly, her performance of the loving wife flawless. "You look tired, darling. Are you feeling all right?" "Just a long day," Thomas replied, noting how Elena immediately focused on his apparent health issues. "But I'm looking forward to a relaxing dinner with my family." Marcus stood and shook Thomas's hand with a grip that lingered slightly too long. "Thomas, you look great for someone who's been having health issues. Elena's been so worried about you." "I appreciate the concern," Thomas said, taking his seat at the table. "Elena mentioned you brought some supplements that might help." "Actually, yes," Marcus replied, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I've been working with a naturopathic doctor who specializes in cardiac health. These supplements have helped several of my clients with similar stress-related heart issues." Marcus placed a small bottle of capsules on the table. "The doctor recommends taking 2 with dinner, along with this special herbal tea." He produced a small packet of what looked like loose tea leaves. Thomas studied the supplements and tea, knowing that one or both contained whatever Marcus and Elena planned to use to kill him. "That's very thoughtful of you both. I'll definitely try them." Elena's smile was radiant. "We just want you to be healthy and happy, darling. You work so hard, and we worry about the stress affecting your heart." As the evening progressed, Thomas played the role of the trusting husband while documenting every detail of Elena and Marcus's behavior. They were both unusually attentive, constantly asking about his health and encouraging him to try the supplements. "You know," Elena said during the main course, "Marcus and I were talking about the future, about what would happen if your health issues got worse." "What kind of future planning?" Thomas asked innocently. "Well," Marcus interjected, "Elena mentioned that you've been having more chest pains lately. We think it might be wise to have some contingency plans in place." Thomas felt the recorder in his pocket capturing every word. "What kind of contingency plans?" Elena reached across the table and took his hand. "Darling, we love you, and we want to make sure you're not stressed about business or financial matters. If your health requires you to step back from work, we want you to know that everything will be taken care of." "Elena's been learning about the business," Marcus added. "She's really quite capable of handling things if you need to focus on your health." Thomas squeezed Elena's hand, marveling at how she could plan his murder while holding his hand and speaking of love. "You two have thought of everything. We just want what's best for you," Elena said, her eyes glistening with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "Your health is more important than any business or money." As dessert arrived, Marcus became more insistent about the supplements. "Thomas, you really should try these tonight. The naturopathic doctor said they work best when taken with a full meal." "And the tea," Elena added. "It's supposed to be very soothing for cardiac stress." And Thomas looked at the supplements and tea, knowing that taking them would likely be the last thing he ever did. But he also knew that refusing them would alert Elena and Marcus that he suspected their plan. "You know what?" Thomas said, picking up the supplement bottle. "I think I'll save these for when I get home. I want to read the ingredients first. You know how careful I am about what I put in my body." Elena's smile flickered slightly. "Of course, darling, but the tea might be nice now. It's supposed to help with relaxation." Thomas could see the desperation beginning to show in Elena's eyes. Whatever timeline she and Marcus were working with, they needed him to consume the poison tonight. "Actually," Thomas said, standing up from the table. "I'm feeling a bit tired. Would you mind if we called it an early evening? I think I need to get home and rest." Elena and Marcus exchanged a look that confirmed Thomas's suspicions. They had planned for him to consume the poison at the restaurant, probably expecting him to have a heart attack in the private dining room where they could control the narrative. "Of course, darling," Elena said, but Thomas could hear the frustration in her voice. "Let's get you home so you can rest." As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus insisted on giving Thomas the supplements and tea to take home. "Promise me you'll try these tonight," he said. "I really think they'll help with your stress." "I promise," Thomas lied, knowing that he would be testing the substances for poison rather than consuming them. The drive home was tense, with Elena constantly asking about his health and suggesting that he might want to try the supplements as soon as they got home. Thomas could feel her desperation growing as her plan began to unravel. "Elena," Thomas said as they pulled into their driveway, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. Your support, your love, your concern for my health. It means everything to me." Elena's eyes filled with tears that might have been genuine remorse or might have been frustration at her failing plan. "I love you, Thomas, more than anything in the world." As they entered their house, Thomas realized that the next few hours would determine whether he lived to expose Elena's conspiracy or became another victim of her greed. But Elena had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated the man she had married, and that mistake was about to cost her everything. Thomas Carter stood in his kitchen at 11:30 p.m., staring at the bottle of supplements and packet of herbal tea that Marcus had insisted he take home. Elena had gone upstairs to bed an hour ago, but not before making 3 separate suggestions that he should try the healing supplements before sleep. "They work best at night when your body can rest and recover," she had said, kissing his forehead with what seemed like genuine affection. "Promise me you'll take them, darling. I'm so worried about your heart." Now, alone in the kitchen with the potential instruments of his murder, Thomas felt a cold clarity settle over him. He carefully photographed the supplements and tea from every angle, then used a small knife to extract samples of both substances, sealing them in separate plastic bags that he labeled and dated. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake Morrison. "Security audit complete. You need to see this ASAP. Elena accessed files she had no business looking at. Can you meet me at the office early tomorrow?" Thomas typed back, "Make it 6 a.m. And Jake, if something happens to me tonight, take the evidence to the police immediately. Elena is not who we think she is." "What the hell is going on, Tom?" "I'll explain everything tomorrow. Just promise me, if I don't show up, call 911 and tell them to investigate Elena." Thomas turned off his phone and focused on the task at hand. He needed to make Elena and Marcus believe their plan had worked while gathering evidence that would destroy them both. The digital recorder was still running, and the heart monitor was documenting his vital signs throughout the evening. He filled a glass with water and sat at the kitchen island, staring at the supplements. If he was right about Elena's plan, taking these pills would cause a heart attack that would look natural given his recent hospital scare. Elena would play the grieving widow, inherit his fortune, and probably marry Marcus within a year. But Thomas had a different plan. He opened the supplement bottle and shook 2 pills into his palm, then carefully photographed them before placing them back in the bottle. Instead of swallowing the pills, he crushed them with the back of a spoon and mixed the powder with water, creating a solution that he poured into a small vial for later testing. For the tea, Thomas went through the motions of brewing it, allowing the aroma to fill the kitchen in case Elena was listening from upstairs. But instead of drinking it, he poured the liquid into another vial and disposed of the tea leaves in the garbage disposal. Then Thomas did something that would either save his life or end it. He called his personal physician, Dr. Sarah Kim, on her emergency line. "Dr. Kim, this is Thomas Carter. I'm sorry to call so late, but I have a medical emergency." "Thomas, what's wrong? Are you having chest pains again?" "No, but I believe someone is trying to poison me." I need you to meet me at the hospital immediately for blood work and cardiac monitoring." There was a pause before Dr. Kim responded. "Thomas, that's a very serious accusation. Are you certain you're not experiencing paranoia related to stress or medication?" Thomas realized that Elena's narrative about his declining mental state had reached even his own doctor. "Dr. Kim, I'm completely lucid and rational. My wife has been planning to kill me for my inheritance, and tonight she gave me supplements that I believe contain cardiac toxins. Thomas, I think you should come to the emergency room so we can evaluate your mental state and—" "I'm not having a psychiatric episode," Thomas interrupted firmly. "I have evidence of a conspiracy to murder me, and I need medical documentation to prove what's being done to me." Dr. Kim's tone became more professional. "If you truly believe you've been poisoned, then yes, you need immediate medical attention. I'll meet you at Swedish Medical Center in 20 minutes. Thomas quietly gathered the evidence he had collected, the vials of crushed supplements and tea, the photographs, the digital recordings, and prepared to leave for the hospital. But first, he needed to make Elena believe her plan had worked. He climbed the stairs to their bedroom, where Elena was lying in bed reading a book. She looked up with apparent concern as he entered. "How are you feeling, darling? Did you try the supplements Marcus brought?" "I did," Thomas lied, noting how Elena's eyes immediately focused on his face, looking for signs of distress. "They made me feel a bit strange, actually. My chest feels tight and I'm having trouble breathing." Elena sat up in bed, her expression shifting to what looked like genuine worry. "Oh no, darling. Maybe you're having a reaction to something. Should we call Dr. Kim?" Thomas clutched his chest dramatically. I think I need to go to the hospital. Something doesn't feel right." Elena jumped out of bed, reaching for her phone. "I'll call 911 right now." "Don't worry, darling. Everything will be fine." As Elena dialed emergency services, Thomas watched her performance with fascination. She was either genuinely concerned about his welfare, or she was an actress worthy of an Academy Award. 911, my husband is having chest pains and difficulty breathing. He has a history of cardiac issues. Yes, we need an ambulance immediately. Eleanor gave their address and hung up, then rushed to Thomas's side. "The ambulance is coming, darling. Just try to stay calm and breathe slowly." Thomas allowed Elena to help him downstairs, marveling at how convincing her concern appeared. If he hadn't discovered her conspiracy, he would have been completely convinced by her loving care. The ambulance arrived within minutes, and the paramedics quickly assessed Thomas's condition. His heart rate was elevated from stress and adrenaline, which supported his claim of cardiac distress. "We're taking you to Swedish Medical Center," the lead paramedic announced. "Your wife can follow in her car." As Thomas was loaded into the ambulance, he saw Elena watching from their front door, her face a mask of worry and fear. But he also noticed her reaching for her phone, probably to call Marcus with an update on their plan's progress. At the hospital, Dr. Kim was waiting with a team of cardiac specialists. Thomas was quickly connected to monitors and had blood drawn for comprehensive testing, including screens for cardiac toxins and unusual substances. "Thomas," Dr. Kim said privately, "your EKG shows some irregularities that are consistent with exposure to certain cardiac stimulants. If you've truly been poisoned, we should see evidence in your blood work within the hour." Elena arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, playing the role of the terrified wife to perfection. She held Thomas's hand, spoke soothingly about his recovery, and asked detailed questions about his treatment that demonstrated either genuine concern or careful planning. "Doctor," Elena said to Dr. Kim, "Thomas has been under tremendous stress lately. His business, his health scare, and I think he's been having some anxiety issues. Could this be related to his mental state?" Thomas watched Dr. Kim's reaction, seeing how Elena was subtly reinforcing the narrative of his declining mental health. If the blood tests came back negative, Elena could claim that Thomas had imagined the poisoning attempt. But an hour later, Dr. Kim returned with results that changed everything. "Thomas, your blood work shows elevated levels of digitalis, a cardiac glycoside that can cause heart arrhythmias and cardiac arrest in high doses. You've definitely been exposed to a cardiotoxic substance. Elena's face went white. Digitalis. How is that possible? It's commonly found in foxglove plants, Dr. Kim explained, but it's also used in certain herbal preparations. Thomas, have you taken any new medications or supplements recently? Thomas looked directly at Elena as he answered. Yes, my wife's brother gave me some herbal supplements tonight. He said they would help with my cardiac stress. Elena's expression shifted through several emotions: shock, fear, and what looked like genuine confusion. Marcus gave you supplements, but Thomas, those were supposed to be natural and safe. He said his naturopathic doctor recommended them. Dr. Kim's expression grew grave. Mrs. Carter, I need you to bring those supplements to the hospital immediately. If they contain digitalis, we need to know the exact concentration to properly treat your husband. Elena nodded quickly. Of course, I'll get them right now. Thomas, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Marcus's supplements could be dangerous. As Eleanor left to retrieve the supplements, Thomas realized that she was either an innocent victim of Marcus's plan, or she was an accomplished actress who was now trying to distance herself from the attempted murder. Dr. Kim pulled Thomas aside. The digitalis levels in your blood are concerning, but not fatal. If you had taken the full dose of whatever you were given, you likely would have suffered cardiac arrest. Someone definitely tried to poison you. Doctor, I need you to preserve all the evidence, the blood samples, the test results, everything. This is going to be a criminal matter. When Elena returned with the supplement bottle, Dr. Kim immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. The results confirmed that the pills contained concentrated digitalis extract, enough to kill a healthy adult, let alone someone with a supposed cardiac condition. Mrs. Carter, Dr. Kim said carefully, these supplements contain a lethal dose of cardiac toxin. Your husband could have died if he had taken the full dose. Elena's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't understand. Marcus said they were safe. He said his doctor recommended them. How could this happen? Thomas watched his wife's breakdown, trying to determine if her distress was genuine or performed. Elena was either an innocent victim who had been manipulated by her brother, or she was a master manipulator who was now trying to save herself. Elena, Thomas said gently, I need you to call Marcus right now. We need to know where he got these supplements and who this naturopathic doctor is. Elena nodded through her tears and dialed Marcus's number. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. He's not answering, Elena said, her voice shaking. Thomas, what if he did this on purpose? The possibility that Marcus had acted alone, using Eleanor as an unwitting accomplice, was something Thomas hadn't considered. But as he watched his wife's genuine terror and confusion, he began to wonder if Eleanor was as much a victim as he was. Elena, I need you to think carefully. Has Marcus been asking you questions about my health, my business, or our finances? Elena wiped her eyes and nodded slowly. He's been very interested in your recovery from the hospital scare. He asked about your will, about what would happen to the business if something happened to you. I thought he was just being concerned about family security. Thomas felt pieces of the puzzle shifting in his mind. What if Elena's changes to his will weren't part of a murder plot, but Marcus's way of ensuring he would benefit if Thomas died from the poison supplements? Elena, when you made those changes to my will, whose idea was that? Elena looked confused. What changes? Thomas, I haven't made any changes to your will. Thomas's blood ran cold. If Elena hadn't made the changes, then Marcus had forged her signature, just as he had forged Thomas's. Elena wasn't a co-conspirator. She was another victim of Marcus's elaborate scheme. Elena, we need to call the police immediately. I think your brother has been planning to kill me and frame you for it. As the full scope of Marcus's betrayal became clear, Thomas realized that Eleanor's life was in as much danger as his own. Marcus had positioned her to inherit Thomas's fortune, but he had also positioned her to take the blame for Thomas's murder. The man they had trusted as family had been planning to destroy them both. The Seattle Police Department's Major Crimes Unit arrived at Swedish Medical Center at 3:47 a.m., led by Detective Maria Santos, a seasoned investigator who specialized in financial crimes and attempted murder cases. Thomas Carter lay in his hospital bed, connected to cardiac monitors, while Elena sat beside him, still shaking from the revelation that her brother had tried to kill her husband and frame her for the crime. "Mr. Carter," Detective Santos said, settling into a chair with her notepad, "Dr. Kim briefed me on your situation. You believe your brother-in-law attempted to poison you with digitalis." "I don't believe it. I know it," Thomas replied, handing her the vials of evidence he had collected. "These contain samples of the supplements and tea Marcus Rodriguez gave me tonight. The lab confirmed they contained lethal doses of cardiac toxins." Detective Santos examined the evidence bags. "And Mrs. Carter, you had no knowledge of your brother's plan?" Elena looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Detective, I thought I was helping my husband by encouraging him to try natural remedies for his stress. Marcus told me he had been working with a naturopathic doctor who specialized in cardiac health. I never imagined he would try to poison Thomas." "Mrs. Carter, we'll need to verify that. Mr. Carter mentioned that someone made unauthorized changes to his will. Do you know anything about that?" Elena's confusion was evident. "What changes? Thomas, what is she talking about?" Thomas explained about his meeting with Jonathan Morrison and the discovery that Elena had supposedly altered his will to benefit herself and Marcus. As he spoke, Elena's face went from confusion to horror to rage. "That bastard!" Elena whispered. "He forged my signature. He's been planning this for months." Detective Santos leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, I need you to think carefully. Has your brother been asking unusual questions about your husband's business or finances?" "Yes," Elena said, her voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. "Marcus has been struggling financially for years. His real estate business failed, and he's been borrowing money from us constantly. But lately, he's been asking detailed questions about Thomas's company, about our insurance policies, about what would happen if Thomas couldn't work." "When did these questions start?" Elena thought for a moment. "Right after Thomas's hospital scare 2 weeks ago. Marcus suddenly became very interested in Thomas's health and recovery. He kept suggesting that Thomas needed to reduce stress and maybe step back from the business. Thomas felt his anger building as he realized how Marcus had manipulated both of them. Detective, Marcus positioned himself to inherit 1/4 of my estate while making Elena look like the primary beneficiary. If I had died from the poison, Elena would have been the obvious suspect, while Marcus played the grieving brother-in-law. And then what? Detective Santos asked. What was his endgame? Probably to have Elena convicted of my murder, Thomas said grimly. With Elena in prison, Marcus would likely inherit everything as the next of kin. He would have gotten my entire fortune while eliminating both of us, Elena gasped. He was planning to destroy both our lives. Thomas, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what he was doing. Detective Santos made notes while asking more questions. Do either of you know where Marcus is right now? He's not answering his phone, Elena replied, but he has an apartment in Belltown, and he sometimes stays at a cabin our family owns in the San Juan Islands. We'll check both locations. In the meantime, I need both of you to stay here at the hospital. If Marcus realizes his plan has failed, he might become desperate and dangerous. As Detective Santos left to coordinate the search for Marcus, Thomas and Elena found themselves alone for the first time since discovering the conspiracy. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of betrayal and the fragility of trust that had been shattered and was slowly being rebuilt. Thomas, Elena said quietly, I know you have no reason to trust me right now, but I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I love you more than anything in the world. Thomas studied his wife's face, seeing the genuine anguish and fear in her eyes. Elena, I believe you, but we need to understand how Marcus was able to manipulate us so completely. Elena nodded, wiping away fresh tears. He's always been charming and persuasive. Even as children, Marcus could talk his way out of any trouble. Our parents always said he could sell ice to Eskimos. But this wasn't just charm. This was a sophisticated plan that required detailed knowledge of our finances, our legal arrangements, and our personal lives. He's been staying with us on and off for the past 6 months, Elena admitted. Every time his business failed or he couldn't make rent, we'd let him stay in our guest room. He had access to our home, our computers, our personal documents. Thomas felt sick as he realized how thoroughly Marcus had infiltrated their lives. He's been planning this since he moved in with us. Every conversation, every family dinner, every moment of apparent concern. It was all intelligence gathering for his murder plot. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She looked at it, and her face went white. "What is it?" Thomas asked. "It's from Marcus," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. She showed Thomas the message. "I know you're at the hospital. I know Thomas survived. We need to talk before you do something we'll all regret. Meet me at the cabin. Come alone, or Thomas will have another accident." Detective Santos returned to the room just as Elena was showing Thomas the threatening message. "This confirms that Marcus knows his plan failed," the detective said. "He's desperate now, which makes him extremely dangerous. He wants Elena to meet him at the family cabin," Thomas said. "He's threatening to hurt me if she doesn't come alone." "Absolutely not," Detective Santos said firmly. "Mrs. Carter, you're not going anywhere near your brother. We'll handle this through proper law enforcement channels." Elena's phone buzzed again with another message from Marcus. "You have 1 hour to get to the cabin. If you're not there, or if you bring police, Thomas won't survive the night. I have people watching the hospital." Thomas felt a chill as he realized that Marcus might have accomplices they didn't know about. "Detective, what if he's not working alone? What if there are other people involved in this conspiracy?" Detective Santos immediately called for additional security at the hospital. "We're going to move both of you to a secure location while we apprehend Marcus. His threats suggest he has resources we haven't identified." As hospital security and police officers took positions around Thomas's room, Elena received a phone call from Marcus. Detective Santos nodded for her to answer while they traced the call. "Elena," Marcus's voice was calm, but carried an undertone of menace. "I hope you're considering my offer carefully. Marcus, how could you do this to us? Thomas could have died." "Thomas was supposed to die," Marcus replied coldly. "Just like our parents were supposed to die in that car accident 5 years ago." Elena's face went white with shock. "What are you talking about? Our parents died in an accident." "Our parents died because I needed their life insurance money to pay off gambling debts. The brake failure wasn't an accident, Elena. I've been planning and executing murders for years." Thomas and Detective Santos exchanged horrified looks as they realized they were dealing with a serial killer, not just a greedy brother-in-law. "You're lying," Elena whispered. "You couldn't have killed our parents." "I killed them, and I was planning to kill Thomas tonight. The only question now is whether you're going to cooperate with me or join them." Detective Santos signaled for Elena to keep Marcus talking while the trace continued. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want you to come to the cabin so we can discuss our options. Thomas's death was supposed to look natural, but now that he's survived, we need to consider alternative approaches." "Alternative approaches?" "Murder-suicide is always believable when a marriage is under stress. You kill Thomas in a fit of jealous rage, then take your own life out of guilt. Very tragic, very convincing." Eleanor's hand shook as she held the phone. "I would never hurt Thomas." "You would if the alternative was watching him die slowly and painfully." "Elena, I have resources you don't understand, people who owe me favors. If you don't cooperate, Thomas will suffer before he dies." Detective Santos wrote a note and showed it to Elena. "Keep him talking. We almost have his location." "Marcus, why are you doing this? We've always helped you when you needed money." "Because I'm tired of being the failure in the family, tired of watching you live in luxury while I struggle to pay rent, tired of being dependent on handouts from my successful sister and her rich husband." So you decided to kill us. I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning. Our parents left everything to you because you were the responsible one, the successful one. But I'm the one who's been planning and working for this moment for 5 years. Detective Santos held up her hand, indicating that they had traced the call. She whispered to Thomas, "He's at the cabin. We have teams moving in now." "Elena," Marcus continued, "you have 30 minutes to get to the cabin. If you're not here, Thomas dies tonight. And Elena, don't think the police can protect you. I have people everywhere." The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at her phone in horror. "Did you get him?" Thomas asked Detective Santos. "We have his location and teams are moving in. But Mr. Carter, we need to take his threat seriously. If Marcus has accomplices, you could still be in danger." As if summoned by her words, the lights in Thomas's hospital room suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. "That's not a power failure," Detective Santos said, drawing her weapon. "Someone cut the power to this floor." Through the window, Thomas could see figures moving in the parking lot, people who didn't look like hospital staff or patients. Marcus hadn't been bluffing about having resources. The game was far from over, and Thomas realized that surviving the poison had only been the beginning of their ordeal. Eleanor grabbed his hand as the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside their room. "Thomas," she whispered, "I'm so sorry I brought this into our lives." "We're going to survive this," Thomas replied, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Detective Santos spoke into her radio. "We need immediate backup at Swedish Medical Center. The suspect has accomplices, and they're making a move on the witnesses." As the footsteps grew closer, Thomas realized that Marcus's plan was more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The man who had tried to poison him wasn't just a greedy brother-in-law. He was a calculating killer, with resources and connections that made him far more dangerous than they had realized. The real battle for their lives was just beginning. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across Thomas Carter's hospital room as Detective Santos positioned herself between the door and the bed where Thomas and Elena huddled together. The footsteps in the hallway had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence that was somehow more terrifying than the approaching threat had been. "Seattle PD, this is Detective Santos," she whispered into her radio. "I need immediate tactical response at Swedish Medical Center, Floor 7. We have multiple suspects attempting to access protected witnesses." The response crackled back. "Detective Santos, we're showing a communication blackout from your location. Are you secure?" "Negative. The suspects have cut power and are likely jamming communications. We need—" The radio went dead with a burst of static. Thomas felt Elena's hand tighten in his as they realized they were cut off from outside help. Through the window, he could see more figures moving in the parking lot, and what looked like a van blocking the main entrance to the hospital. "Detective," Thomas whispered, "how many people could Marcus have working for him?" "I don't know, but this level of coordination suggests we're dealing with more than just a desperate brother-in-law," Santos replied, checking her weapon. "This is organized crime." Eleanor's face was pale in the red emergency lighting. "Thomas, what if Marcus has been involved with dangerous people all along? What if his failed businesses were just a cover for something worse?" Before Thomas could respond, Elena's phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. "I told you I had resources. Your police protection is useless. Come to the cabin now, or watch Thomas die in that hospital bed." Detective Santos looked at the message and made a decision. "We're getting out of here. There's a service elevator at the end of the hall that connects to the parking garage. If we can reach my car, we can get to a secure location." "What about the people in the parking lot?" Thomas asked. "We'll have to risk it. Staying here makes us sitting ducks." Santos carefully opened the door and peered into the hallway. The emergency lighting revealed several figures moving toward their room from both directions. They were trapped. "Back inside," Santos whispered urgently. "We need another way out." Thomas looked around the room desperately, his mind racing through possibilities. The window was 7 floors up, but there was a maintenance ledge that ran along the outside of the building. "There," he said, pointing to the window. That ledge connects to the stairwell window about 20 feet away. Detective Santos looked at the narrow ledge and shook her head. That's suicide. One slip and you're dead. We're dead if we stay here, Elena said, surprising them both with her resolve. Thomas, if you think we can make it, I trust you. The sound of voices in the hallway was getting closer. Thomas could hear someone trying door handles, systematically checking each room. They're going to find us in the next 60 seconds, Santos said. If we're going to move, it has to be now. Thomas opened the window, feeling the cold November air rush into the room. The ledge was about 18 inches wide, enough to walk on if you were careful and fearless. 7 stories below, the hospital parking lot looked like a miniature landscape. Elena goes first, Thomas said. I'll follow, then Detective Santos. I should go first, Santos protested. I'm trained for this. You're also the only one with a gun, Thomas replied. If they break in here, you need to buy us time. Elena was already climbing out the window, her face set with determination. I can do this, she said, though her voice shook slightly. Thomas watched his wife inch along the narrow ledge, her back pressed against the building's facade. She moved slowly but steadily, and within 2 minutes she had reached the stairwell window and was working to open it. Your turn, Santos said to Thomas. As Thomas climbed out onto the ledge, he heard the door to their room being tested. The handle turned, but Santos had locked it from the inside. That would buy them maybe 30 seconds. The ledge was more treacherous than it had looked from inside. The concrete was slick with moisture from the Seattle drizzle, and the wind at 7 stories up was stronger than he had anticipated. Thomas forced himself not to look down as he inched along the building's exterior. Behind him, he heard the door to their room splinter as someone kicked it in. Seattle PD! Santos shouted. Drop your weapons! Thomas heard the sound of gunfire as he reached the stairwell window where Elena was waiting. She had managed to open it and was already climbing inside. Detective Santos! Thomas called back along the ledge. Santos appeared at the hospital room window, her weapon drawn. Go! I'll be right behind you. More gunshots echoed from inside the building as Thomas climbed through the stairwell window. Elena was waiting for him, her face streaked with tears, but her expression determined. Is she coming? Elena asked. Thomas looked back to see Santos climbing out onto the ledge, but there were figures in the hospital room behind her. One of them was raising a weapon. Detective, look out! Thomas shouted. Santos spun around and fired 3 quick shots back into the room, then continued along the ledge. But Thomas could see blood on her left arm. She had been hit. I'm okay, Santos called out as she reached the stairwell window. Just a graze. We need to keep moving. The stairwell was dark except for the emergency lighting, but it was empty. They descended quickly, Santos leading with her weapon drawn despite her wounded arm. Where are we going? Elena asked. Parking garage, Santos replied. My car is on level B2. If we can reach it, we can get out of here. As they reached the garage level, Thomas's phone buzzed with a call from Marcus. Answer it, Santos instructed. Keep him talking while we get to the car. Marcus, Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. Thomas, you're making this much more difficult than it needs to be. My associates are very unhappy about the complications you've caused. Your associates? Did you really think I was working alone? Thomas, I've been part of an organization that specializes in inheritance fraud for years. Your case was supposed to be simple, a quick poisoning, a grieving widow, and a clean transfer of assets. Thomas felt his blood run cold as he realized the scope of what they were facing. How many people have you killed? Enough to know that running from us is pointless. We have resources, connections, and experience that you can't imagine. The smart thing to do is to come to the cabin and let us finish this cleanly. Detective Santos located her car and was working to start it, while Thomas kept Marcus talking. What organization? Thomas asked. Who are you working for? People who understand that wealthy families are resources to be harvested, not protected. Elena was supposed to be our inside person, but she turned out to be too naive and emotional for the work. Elena was never part of your plan. Elena was supposed to be my partner, but she actually fell in love with you. That complicated things considerably. Thomas looked at Elena, seeing the horror in her eyes as she realized that Marcus had been trying to recruit her into a murder conspiracy. The changes to your will, the power of attorney documents. I forged all of that when it became clear that Elena wouldn't cooperate voluntarily. Detective Santos had the car running and was motioning for them to get in quickly. Marcus, this is over. The police know about your organization. You can't kill everyone who knows the truth. Thomas, you'd be surprised what we can accomplish when we put our minds to it. Ask Elena about our parents' car accident. Ask her if she really believes that brake failure was random. The line went dead as they climbed into Santos's car. Elena was sobbing as the full scope of Marcus's crimes became clear. He killed our parents, she whispered. He's been planning this for years. Aye. Detective Santos drove quickly through the parking garage, but as they approached the exit, they saw the van that had been blocking the hospital entrance. It was now positioned to block their escape route. Hold on, Santos said, flooring the accelerator. The police car smashed through the van's side panel, sending it spinning out of the way. Thomas could see armed figures diving for cover as they burst out of the parking garage and onto the Seattle streets. Where are we going? Elena asked. FBI field office, Santos replied. If Marcus is part of an organized inheritance fraud ring, this is bigger than local police can handle. As they drove through the empty Seattle streets at 4:30 a.m., Thomas realized that their ordeal was far from over. Marcus wasn't just a greedy brother-in-law, he was part of a criminal organization that specialized in murdering wealthy people for their inheritances. And now Thomas and Elena were the only witnesses who could expose the entire operation. Detective, Thomas said, how do we know we can trust the FBI? If this organization has been operating for years, they might have people inside law enforcement. Santos's expression grew grim. We don't know, but right now, they're our best option for survival. Elena's phone buzzed with one final message from Marcus. You can run, but you can't hide. We know where you live, where you work, where you shop. This isn't over until you're both dead, and I have what's mine. Thomas put his arm around Elena as they drove toward an uncertain future. They had survived Marcus's poison and escaped his associates at the hospital, but the real battle was just beginning. The inheritance fraud ring that Marcus worked for had been operating for years, killing wealthy people and stealing their fortunes. Thomas and Elena were now the only people who could expose the entire conspiracy. But first, they had to survive long enough to tell their story. 6 months after the night that changed their lives forever, Thomas and Elena Carter sat in the witness gallery of the U.S. District Court in Seattle, watching as Marcus Rodriguez was led into the courtroom in shackles. The man who had once been family, who had shared their dinner table and slept in their guest room while planning their murders, now looked like a broken stranger in an orange prison jumpsuit. The federal investigation that followed their escape from the hospital had uncovered one of the largest inheritance fraud rings in American history. Marcus had been part of an organization called the Beneficiaries, a network of criminals who specialized in infiltrating wealthy families, manipulating wills and trusts, and eliminating heirs through methods designed to look like natural deaths or accidents. The defendant, Marcus Rodriguez, announced federal prosecutor Janet Walsh, stands accused of conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering in connection with a criminal enterprise that has stolen over $200 million from victims across 12 states. Thomas squeezed Elena's hand as they listened to the prosecutor outline the scope of Marcus's crimes. The investigation had revealed that Marcus had been involved in at least 15 suspicious deaths over the past 8 years, including Elena's parents, whose car accident had been carefully orchestrated to look like brake failure. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Prosecutor Walsh continued, the evidence will show that the defendant didn't just plan to murder Thomas Carter for his inheritance. He planned to frame Elena Carter for that murder, then eliminate her as well, leaving himself as the sole beneficiary of a carefully manipulated estate worth $15 million. Detective Maria Santos, now fully recovered from her gunshot wound, was the prosecution's lead witness. She testified about the night at the hospital, the coordinated attack by Marcus's associates, and the evidence that had led to the dismantling of the beneficiaries' organization. The defendant's phone records show over 200 communications with known members of the criminal organization, Santos testified. Bank records reveal payments totaling $50,000 from the organization to Marcus Rodriguez in the months leading up to the attempted murder of Thomas Carter. The defense attorney, a public defender who had drawn an impossible case, tried to argue that Marcus had been coerced by the criminal organization and was as much a victim as Thomas and Eleanor. But the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Sarah Kim testified about the digitalis poisoning, explaining how the concentration of cardiac toxins in the supplements would have caused fatal heart arrhythmias within hours of consumption. If Mr. Carter had taken the full dose of the supplements provided by the defendant, Dr. Kim testified, he would have suffered cardiac arrest and died within 2 to 4 hours. The only reason he survived was because he suspected the poisoning attempt and sought immediate medical attention. Jonathan Morrison, Thomas's attorney, testified about the forged will documents and the sophisticated nature of the fraud scheme. The defendant had created an entire false narrative about Thomas Carter's declining mental health, Morrison explained to the jury. He forged power of attorney documents, medical records, and will modifications, all designed to make Elena Carter appear to be the primary beneficiary while positioning himself to inherit everything after her conviction for murder. But the most devastating testimony came from FBI agent Rebecca Torres, who had led the investigation into the beneficiaries organization. The defendant was not a minor player in this criminal enterprise, Agent Torres testified. Phone records and financial documents show that Marcus Rodriguez was one of the organization's most successful operators. He had successfully completed at least 6 previous inheritance fraud cases, resulting in the deaths of wealthy individuals and the theft of their estates. Thomas felt sick as he listened to the details of Marcus's other crimes. Elderly widows who had died in suspicious accidents, wealthy businessmen who had suffered unexpected heart attacks, families who had been torn apart by greed and betrayal. The defendant's method was always the same, Agent Torres continued. He would identify wealthy targets, infiltrate their families through marriage or adoption, manipulate their estate planning documents, and then eliminate them through methods designed to appear natural. Elena testified on the 4th day of the trial, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of describing her brother's betrayal. Marcus was always charming and persuasive, Elena told the jury. Even as children, he could talk his way out of any trouble. But I never imagined he was capable of murder. The defense attorney cross-examined Elena aggressively, trying to suggest that she had been aware of Marcus's criminal activities and had only turned against him when the plan failed. Mrs. Carter, isn't it true that you benefited financially from your parents' death? I inherited their estate, yes, Eleanor replied calmly, but I would give every penny back to have them alive again. And isn't it true that you made changes to your husband's will without his knowledge? No, that's not true. Marcus forged my signature on those documents, just as he forged my husband's signature. Thomas testified on the 5th day, describing the night he discovered Marcus's conspiracy and the terrifying hours that followed. When I realized that Marcus was planning to kill me and frame my wife for murder, I understood that we were dealing with someone who had no conscience, no empathy, and no limits to what he would do for money. The prosecution's final witness was Dr. Michael Stevens, a forensic accountant who had analyzed the beneficiaries' financial records. The organization operated like a business, Dr. Stevens testified. They had territories, quotas, and profit-sharing arrangements. Marcus Rodriguez was one of their top performers, with a success rate of over 90% in completing inheritance fraud cases. The defense presented no witnesses, instead arguing in closing statements that Marcus had been coerced by the criminal organization and deserved leniency. But Prosecutor Walsh's closing argument was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Rodriguez is not a victim. He is a predator who spent years perfecting the art of murder for profit. He killed Elena Carter's parents for insurance money. He planned to kill Thomas Carter for his inheritance. And he was prepared to kill Elena Carter to cover his tracks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Thomas's attorney, sentenced Marcus to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years for the racketeering charges. "Mr. Rodriguez," Judge Morrison said as she pronounced sentence, "your crimes represent a level of betrayal and callousness that shocks the conscience. You murdered people who trusted you, people who considered you family. The court can find no mitigating factors that would justify anything less than the maximum sentence allowed by law." Marcus showed no emotion as he was led away in shackles, but Thomas noticed him looking back at Elena one final time. There was no remorse in his expression, only cold calculation, as if he was still trying to figure out how his perfect plan had failed. Outside the courthouse, Thomas and Elena spoke to reporters about their ordeal and their hopes for the future. "Marcus's conviction doesn't bring back the people he killed," Thomas said, "but it ensures that he can never hurt another family the way he hurt ours." Eleanor added, "We want other families to know that inheritance fraud is real, and that criminals like Marcus are out there targeting wealthy individuals. Trust your instincts, verify everything, and never assume that family members are above suspicion." The investigation into the beneficiaries organization continued for another year, ultimately resulting in 23 additional convictions and the recovery of over $150 million in stolen assets. The case became a landmark in federal prosecution of inheritance fraud and led to new laws requiring enhanced verification of estate planning documents. Thomas and Elena used their experience to establish the Carter Foundation for Estate Security, a non-profit organization that educates wealthy families about inheritance fraud and provides resources for victims of financial crimes. "Marcus thought he could destroy our lives and steal our future," Elena said at the Foundation's first annual conference. "Instead, he gave us a mission to protect other families from the kind of betrayal we experienced." 2 years after Marcus's conviction, Thomas and Elena renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony attended by close friends and the law enforcement officers who had saved their lives. Detective Santos served as Elena's maid of honor, and FBI agent Torres gave a toast about the power of justice and the importance of never giving up hope. "Marcus Rodriguez thought he was smarter than everyone else," Agent Torres said. "He thought he could manipulate the system, exploit trust, and get away with murder, but he underestimated the strength of the people he tried to destroy." As Thomas and Elena danced at their vow renewal celebration, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The night that had started with poisoned supplements and forged documents had ultimately strengthened their marriage and given them a shared purpose that would define the rest of their lives. Marcus Rodriguez sat in his federal prison cell, serving a life sentence for crimes that had destroyed multiple families and stolen millions of dollars. The beneficiaries organization had been dismantled, its members imprisoned or dead, its stolen wealth returned to the families of victims. But perhaps the most fitting justice was that Marcus's crimes had ultimately created something good in the world. The Carter Foundation had helped dozens of families protect their estates from fraud, and the new federal laws inspired by the case had made inheritance fraud much more difficult to execute. Thomas and Elena had survived Marcus's betrayal not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. They had emerged from their ordeal stronger, wiser, and more committed to each other than ever before. And somewhere in a federal prison, Marcus Rodriguez spent his days knowing that his attempt to destroy the Carter family had instead created a legacy of justice that would protect countless other families for generations to come. The lawyer had hesitated before reading the will that day, sensing something was wrong. That hesitation had saved Thomas Carter's life and exposed a criminal conspiracy that had operated in the shadows for years. Sometimes the most important moments in life come disguised as routine legal meetings, and sometimes the people we trust most are the ones planning our destruction. But justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied when good people refuse to give up the fight.